Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of the Paranormal Encyclopedia. Just bear with me a bit while I do these usual setup stuff. Brian, you can jangle keys if you happen to have them already available.
I have a phone.
Yeah, but it doesn't make the fancy jangling sounds.
No, but it's reflective. That's
True.
really the part of the keys that people
The,
care about.
I think the sound's important too, actually, but. Okay, so. Host. I do still like the picture I use as a thumbnail. Me sitting at the Dejaric table from the Millennium Falcon at Disney World.
Oh yeah, yeah, it looks good.
It's also very nerdy of me. And especially, I like that shirt as well because it's Darth Vader taking a selfie, which I do feel sets the proper tone. Okay, so there we go. Post. Just about ready, everybody. And okay, that doesn't make any sense because it looks like we're live, but I don't see the chat like I usually do. Okay. And that irritates me. Let me go see if I can look at it there because I don't want to ignore chat. What? Oh, because of that. Let's see if I can fix that. Yeah, that's why I had chat turned off. But okay, we have chat again. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of the Paranormal Encyclopedia. As always, I am your host, Kevin Mears, demonologist, paranormal investigator in the Paranormal Encyclopedia, and I am joined by my co-host.
Brian McKinley, sometimes author, sometimes vampire expert, godfather of vampire fiction thrillers. But tonight, werewolves.
Sometimes vampire.
Sometimes occasional vampire, yes. Occasional moonlighting as an actual vampire.
Is that a salaried position or a punch clock position?
Oh, neither.
Of
It's
course not.
completely pro bono.
But yeah, tonight we're going to be continuing the theme of the last few episodes because we've done vampires and ghosts. So we're going to talk about werewolves and kitsune and weretigers and assorted other shape shifting beings from around the world.
Yes.
I do have a bit of news to share as well. So, as most of you are probably totally unaware of, I have another channel called Grumpy Old Gamer, which in theory is supposed to be me talking about role playing, which I never do anything with. But I am actually looking to start a game of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons with a group of friends of mine, which may be there, or I may start my own channel, its own channel. Probably going to start its own channel just because of the fact that it's been so long. It feels like maybe I should just start over. Where we'll be doing possibly live sessions of D&D. And I'll be doing a bunch of other videos about because specifically we're going to do D&D in the Dragonlance setting, which just got released for 5th edition. So I'm going to do a bunch of videos about the Dragonlance setting and the history and the mythology, things like that. Particularly because, well, I really like the 5th edition sourcebook they came up with for Dragonlance. It's mostly an adventure, so the flavor, as it were, all the stuff about the world and the pantheon and all that, amounts to 15 pages. So I'll do some side videos and flesh that out a bit based on the fact I've read tons of the books and a bunch of the older RPG supplements. I know far more about the setting than is probably healthy for anyone's mental health. Because I'm an obsessive nerd and I'm not going to deny that. So check that out. There'll be more information soon. Hopefully it'll be fun. If nothing else, I'm going to be running D&D with a bunch of friends of mine, so I'm going to have fun. It'd be nice if some other people enjoy it too, but we'll see what happens. But okay, Brian. So werewolves. There's always, yep. I've mentioned on the show before that there are certain archetypes in folklore that you find almost everywhere throughout history and before recorded history. The hungry dead, like vampires, ghosts, demons, dragons. And I would very much put shapeshifters in that category.
Yeah. Often sometimes mixed with witches, just like a lot of the other, like witchcraft plays a part in a lot of very traditional shifter folklore, but sometimes it's just considered a natural condition that occurs.
You're absolutely correct. And actually, for the record, witches, magic is another thing that's almost completely universal.
Oh, yeah.
And I would say, usually in my experience, being a werewolf is tied to magic, and often enough in the Middle Ages, tied to the burn people at the stake type of witchcraft. But you're absolutely right. Not always. There are legends of people that are simply born werewolves in Germany and I want to say Ireland, off the top of my head. Then there's the kitsune, which are and a couple of other cultures where they aren't people that turn into animals; they're the other way around.
Yeah, animals that have somehow found a way to become people.
Kitsune, and really we should say fox spirits, because kitsune is the Japanese name for it. But you have very similar legends in Vietnam, in Korea, and China.
Also, surprisingly, I found in the U.S. Southwest, in Hispanic communities, there are also werefox legends, apparently.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Very kind of similar to the werewolf type legends you would get where, a fox is seen attacking, the sheep, and they shoot it and they track the blood back and they find like some hut with like an old woman in it who's got like a gunshot wound.
Exactly where they shot the fox.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is very classic werewolf folklore.
Yeah. So that I think that gets translated into a lot of different animals around the world.
Usually, at least in my experience, the animals that get picked for shapeshifters are usually predators. Usually the dominant predator in an area. So in Europe and a lot of America, it's wolves because wolves are big and intimidating.
Yeah.
In Scandinavia, you get wolves, but you also get bears.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole thing we'll get into with that. Japan, I've heard they have some like wolf stories because there are wolves over there, but it's more foxes. Foxes are the big one.
Yeah, there's foxes. They also have vampiric cats.
I've heard
that are kind of predatory. That have like two tails and transform into the likeness of people to fool you. And then
Japan and its multi-tailed shapeshifters.
Yeah, well, that's how you can always tell. It's kind of a classic thing, like in a lot of the witchcraft werewolf legends, and in the Native American skinwalkers, you could tell that a wolf was not a natural wolf by the fact that its tail didn't move and just kind of hung down limp like a pelt. Because
I hadn't heard that actually.
Oh, you had? No, that's usually considered to be one of the big giveaways of that. That's not a natural wolf. That's a person who has transformed themselves because they've put on a wolf pelt, and that's the one detail that remains is the tail doesn't move.
And that I think is actually a good thing to start by talking about. Is one of the most common elements. It's not universal, like we said. Kitsune and a lot of Asian and just I believe African shapeshifters are actually animals become people,
Yeah,
which is a different thing. But in European folklore and some Native American folklore, it's all about skin. You know,
yeah,
you put on the skin of a wolf and become a wolf. You put on the skin of a bear and you become a bear. And there's an actual historical link to that.
hmm,
It's just two parts. One is a type of magic that's particularly popular and is particularly well known among Native American tribes, but it's been seen in a lot of other places, known as totemic magic. It's
hmm,
a very common type of shamanism, where, particularly before a battle or a hunt, they would put on the skins of animals and
yeah,
dance around the fire and psych themselves up. And in doing so, they thought they could take the power of that animal.
yeah,
And if you're gonna go fight or you're gonna go hunt, you're not gonna nobody's gonna think, I want the power of a cow to go hunt for food. You want the power of a wolf, you want the power of a bear, a cougar, something big and predatory.
yeah. Lions in Africa is a big one.
Yes. Tigers as well.
Hmm.
In India. Not because tigers are not, despite what people might think because of movies, tigers are not native to Africa.
Right.
Um, the other side to this is there's actually a cultural tradition of this that goes into the Middle Ages
Hmm.
that Europe was very familiar with. People have even heard the name for part of it, which is the Berserkers.
Yeah.
Um, you know you want to fill people in?
Well, yeah. You had bear circers and wolf circers
Ulf
and
Zerkers, actually.
Ulf circer. Yeah. Well, that was
Yes.
the Norse word for wolf,
Yep.
and circer I think translates something to like warrior.
My understanding, and I may be wrong, I'm not no linguist, is Zerk. Zerk means shirt
Oh, maybe
or
yeah,
skin. So it's bear skin, wolf skin. So you
yeah,
had these warriors who would don animal skins before they went into battle and were infamous for their ferocity.
yeah,
They're supposed to go completely insane in a fight and kill everyone that was near them, even their own people.
yeah,
This is where the whole idea of going berserk comes from in our modern culture. What's interesting is, yeah, for one, wearing these animal skins, which again gets back into this totemic idea of getting the animal's power by wearing its skin. But the other thing is in some of the prosadas, when they talk about berserkers in particular, they actually turn into gigantic bears.
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that, especially in Native American folklore. There's whole secret societies built around animal skins and wearing the animal skin and becoming that animal. And in those cases, you would have things like deer and other prey
Bison,
animals that bison, yeah, things that people just respected or had.
yeah.
Snakes are a big snake men and women are a big part of different cultures, especially the Hopi have a whole snake ceremony to honor a snake woman that taught the tribe how to grow corn.
See, ladies and gentlemen, this is why I keep Brian around for the episodes that aren't about vampires. I did not know that. I
I
know a lot about European
I
werewolf
just reread
folklore.
it and got
Yeah,
my mind refreshed. But yeah, when I was studying for my one novel
yeah, the
concerning
werewolf one.
I was doing Native American werewolves. I read everything I could get my hands on that had anything to do with that correlation. So
See, the only thing I know about it is, with Native American shapeshifters is the Yinagaloshi, the Skinwalker.
yes, that's the most famous, the Navajo skinwalker.
And by far, I mean, I described them one point, and I think it's fair as skinwalkers are the things that werewolves would have nightmares about.
Yeah, because predominantly the skinwalker isn't interested in transformation for its own shape or for its own sake. It goes back to the kind of medieval idea of a source of power. You know,
Mm-hmm.
skinwalkers are all about murdering other people and stealing their life to prolong theirs, committing evil deeds in the forms of animals where they can get away with it more easily, and just being a general nuisance and problem to the community. They're generally never something that's looked on favorably.
And there are, I mean, just like there are things that a number of traditional tribal groups still believe in,
Yeah.
as I understand it. We would not be having this conversation in a lot of Navajo
No,
areas
they would not want to speak about it.
because you don't know who is a skinwalker. Because they can not only do they take the form of animals, they can take the form of people.
Well, they are people. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean other people, not just themselves.
Oh yeah, they can. Yeah, they can sometimes pretend to be other people, other
I mean,
forms of witchcraft.
so the person you may think you know the person you're talking to, but it could be a skinwalker in disguise. Um, I know that also in particular, at least traditionally, the way that you become a skinwalker is you have to kill a member of your own family.
Yeah, yeah. The first life you take is somebody close to you.
Which is again why I say these are the things that werewolves have nightmares about. Because in European folklore, there's a couple of ways to become a werewolf. You can piss the wrong person off and get cursed.
Yeah.
You can cut a deal with Satan.
Hmm.
You can undergo a magical ritual of your own.
Yeah, like a wolf
You can even
bell.
also just be born a werewolf,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
even in a few countries, God can make you a werewolf to do good things.
Right. That's my favorite. That's the one you
Yeah.
introduced me to. Was the holy werewolves of God.
Yes,
I
God's
think you should,
hounds.
I think you should mention some of that because I don't think that's something a lot of people hear about in popular
I,
culture.
Gladly, because it's also a lot of fun in my opinion. So if anyone who's interested in this can go on the channel and look up Werewolf Fighting Witch Trial. My old co-host Drew Rosansky actually did a reading of a trial from the Roman Inquisition that took place in Litvonia. So the Roman Inquisition hears about a man living in Litvonia who is telling people he's a werewolf. His name's Thrice. So they dispatch an inquisitor to talk to the guy. And Thrice tells the inquisitor asks, "So you're a werewolf?" Thrice's answer is, yes, I am." The inquisitor's like, "Well, that was easy. Okay, so you're in league with Satan." Because again, very much witchcraft in the Christian mindset, or werewolves were considered witches in the Christian mindset in Europe during witch trials. They were burnt at the stake in France, for example. Um, and Thrice goes to him, "No, I'm not in league with Satan. He hates me." And the Inquisitor goes, "What?" And Thrice begins to explain. He's a member of a secret society, an order. He was taught how to do it and given a wolfskin belt. And then on certain nights of the year, usually 3 nights each tied to the harvest, he would don this belt, become a wolf, and go down to hell. Because you see, what would happen is witches and demons would come out of hell on these nights and steal grain and steal cattle. These werewolves would go down to hell, do battle with the witches and the demons, and bring the food back. The Inquisitor was quite understandably perplexed by this situation because he's not in league with Satan. So ultimately, the decision was, okay, stop telling people you're a werewolf. There's more than one trial like this, so I may be confusing them, but I believe in this. This is the one where it's like, okay, we're going to sentence you to be lashed, but you're an old man, so we're gonna not actually. We're suspending the sentence. You're not actually going to be punished. And when he tells them, stop telling people you're a werewolf, he's like, well, that's a problem because I have to train the next generation, my successor. And he's like, yeah, don't do that either. And would it kill you to go to church once in a while? And that was it. He wasn't tortured. He wasn't executed. He was told, stop telling everybody you're a werewolf and go on about your business. And the other, like I said, there's at least one other trial I've read of. And again, they weren't punished for it. It was stop doing the thing. Or at least stop doing the thing. And when you tell me you're not, I'm going to go, la, 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 I'm not listening. But in the Lithuania trial, he even comments that there are other werewolves in Germany and Scandinavia that do the same thing that he's aware of. And it's absolutely fascinating me, especially because you don't see this. The closest I know of it showing up in fiction is the Penny Dreadful series. The werewolf in that winds up being called God's Hound.
Yeah.
Is like a good guy. But otherwise, nobody really runs with. The other place that it vaguely comes up is in the concept for Werewolf the Apocalypse, a role-playing game.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it was one of the first things I ever saw where they tried to take a werewolf and make them the good guys. Aside from maybe Werewolf by Night, the Marvel comic,
but and even now movie.
Yeah, now movie. But even that was more like the Incredible Hulk, kind of an idea, just using a werewolf instead of an Incredible Hulk.
Which makes sense, since werewolves, I at least have always thought, were probably part of the inspiration for Jekyll and Hyde, which was the inspiration for the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
Well, that's another thing that's worth maybe talking about is pretty much everything that you've learned about werewolves from the movie is wrong.
It comes from the movies.
Yeah.
One particular.
Not entirely. Some of it actually comes from an older movie.
Okay.
The connection to the full moon, for example, comes from a movie called Werewolf of London.
Right. Yeah, that was Universal's first attempt.
And it's actually quite a good movie, in my opinion.
It's not bad. It's interesting seeing the differences. Like it's the only werewolf I've ever seen that puts on more clothes to go out at night. He actually stops to like grab a cloak and go out. Like this is a werewolf that knows
fashion sense,
how to look good. If I'm going out right. But
it's also where being bitten turning you into a werewolf mostly comes from.
Yes. Yeah.
Although there are some legends about getting bitten by a wolf making you into a werewolf.
Yeah, maybe later on, but it's really not as present in the folklore as you would believe from the current state, where that's like usually the number one way to be a werewolf.
The go-to.
It's like in folklore that's almost never shows up. It's usually, you've got things like drinking water from a wolf's paw print might turn you into a werewolf, being cursed, seeking out the spell to do it yourself. Those are all the really
selling your soul to Satan.
Yeah, being born in the wrong, like being born on Christmas.
Which it might also make you into a vampire, depending on which legend you're going by.
Yeah, when you die. But a lot of times, if you are a werewolf, you're guaranteed to come back as a
vampire on death.
because why not?
So. For the fun records, folks, one of the most famous, probably the most famous person as a human being as opposed to God, because Zeus did it too. But the most famous person to curse someone into being a werewolf is St. Patrick.
Yeah.
He was supposed to have done it a couple of... It was, aside from making like flowers literally devour his enemies, turning people into wolves was almost his go-to move. There's kings that he supposedly turned into wolves to teach them humility. There's a pack of druids that he turned into wolves for not converting.
Well, that's interesting because, yeah, the king being turned into a wolf, that's where lichen comes from in the Greek myths.
Yeah,
There, where the gods cursed him and made him and like his some of his followers into wolves because of their cruelty and bad
cannibalism, wasn't
behavior.
it?
I think so. Maybe, yeah, maybe they
My
actually engaged in cannibalism.
my memory, and I may be wrong, it happens, is that they actually King Lycan in particular came to Zeus came to him, and Lycan made the serious mistake of trying to serve Zeus human flesh,
Oh,
and that's why he got turned into a wolf. The
yeah,
reality being, mythology is not a static thing, so don't assume that my version is right and Brian's version is wrong, or vice versa. They're probably different versions of the same story.
oh yeah. I'm sure there are tons, especially if you actually went back to ancient Greek times. They would have had a dozen versions of the story. But yeah, that's where the word lycanthropy gets its basis, is from that mythological story. For
So
those people that are linguistically interested,
inclined.
yeah,
And speaking of linguistically inclined people, let's clear something up. The word were is Old English and German for man.
yeah,
So werewolf just means man wolf. So to say were man is silly.
yeah.
Um, I always like the D&D solution because instead of were man, the way they refer to like animals that become humans is you have a werewolf, which is human becomes a wolf, and a wolf were, which is a wolf that becomes a man. It keeps it simple. I don't know that it has any basis in folklore or occultism, but it makes it simpler, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it does. I think the because from what I saw, like with the Japanese, they have all their specific names for things, like the kitsune being the foxes. Um, where was the other one? Yeah, China and Japan, they have the naga, that are the snake people, and
Mm-hmm.
they're considered like divine beings and messengers. Uh,
Oh, for that matter, relevant to my recent research. Um, Speaking of witches turning into animals, a lot of the accusations in Salem claim that the witches turned into cats.
yeah, well, cats have always been very tied in to like
Oh
the
yeah,
occult for some reason.
particularly black cats,
Yeah.
but cats in general. Well, it's because cat. I mean, just look at a cat, people. You know it knows things it's not supposed to know, and you can't trust those shifty little buggers.
Oh, you want to hear the most interesting were creature that I or shifter that I came upon in my
Yes,
research?
yes, I do.
They are something called an incantonos. They are Brazilian, and they are people who transform into dolphins.
Really?
Yes, were dolphins. They're a thing. In human form, apparently, they have a penchant for dressing in like 1800s style white suits and hats
Like
for
you do.
for men. Yeah, and flowing white dresses with hats for women. And the reason they wear the hats is to disguise the blowhole that still exists on the top of their head in human form. So they're usually reluctant to remove their hat, and that's like a tip off for people to know
Have you
that.
ever meet a Brazilian person who really, really won't take off their hat under any circumstances? You might have a were-dolphin on your hand.
Yes,
Were-dolphins.
yeah,
There's also, of course,
you heard it here
selkie,
first.
which
Yeah,
are
the
people that turn into seals.
seals.
That's one.
Yes, yeah, very popular in Irish mythology.
Particularly women that turn into seals.
Hmm.
Again, the skin is important. They put on the skin to turn into a seal, meaning that the men who marry them unawares, if they can find the seal skin while the woman's in human form, they could burn it and the woman will remain normal.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of apparently folklore of men finding these sort of beautiful women and marrying them, and them turning out to be shapeshifters
Yep.
of one form or another. And that seems to be a very common story in like a lot of cultures. I was running into it for almost everything. There's a story of some guy that picks up some beautiful woman and sight, based on sight, just decides he's going to marry her. And different the stories have different endings. Sometimes the woman just goes away and returns to the wild. Sometimes she kills the husband. Sometimes the husband lets her go. That's all different. But
Yeah.
the
Once in
beginning,
a great while, they might even live happily ever after,
yeah,
but not often.
once in a while, but very rarely. The stories always seem to be designed to kind of end in heartbreak or tragedy.
Which makes me think also is one of my favorite Knights of the Round Table, who is a reversal of the story we've just talked about.
Ah,
Sir Maruk.
ah, don't know
So
him.
Sir Maruk married a witch, and he was a werewolf. And I can't remember if he was cursed particularly by her, or it was a family thing. I think it was a family thing. But he would have to take off his clothes, and then he could turn into an animal. And then he would have to go find his clothes and put them back on to turn back into a man. He pissed off his wife at one point, and his wife hid the clothes. So he got stuck as a wolf for several years.
Oh wow.
Um, my friend, a good friend of the channel, and my friend in general, Patrick Thomas, has included Marok in a couple of his short stories. Um, which is where I first heard about him. But for the record, he actually is mentioned with a variation of the story in La Morte de Arthur. So no, this is an actual Knight of the Round Table.
Yeah. No,
That's a
that's
subject we should get into one of these days, is Arthurian legends.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's plenty to discuss there. Well, next time we need a topic, we can go to that one.
Well, we'll need a topic for next week, although I might want a little more time to do research. The Holy Grail being a whole other thing, a whole topic within the topic, as it were.
Yeah, which is funny because a lot of people, some of the research I was doing or my friend had done in preparation for a novel, said that the Holy Grail thing was actually something that was kind of tacked on to the Arthur stories at a later time when they were in the process of being Christianized, that they weren't really part of the original Welsh folklore of Arthur.
There's a lot of debate there, just because there's one hypothesis that the Holy Grail is actually a code for the cauldron of, I want to say, Dagda. But there's a cauldron in Celtic folklore, and I mean pagan Celtic folklore, that you can supposedly use to resurrect the dead.
Ah.
And it's been hypothesized that got Christianized into the Holy Grail.
That's possible. Maybe after Arthur was killed,
Maybe
somebody went questing for this thing that could bring him back to life. Certainly seems reasonable.
Okay, we're getting slightly sidetracked, but I'm going to do this real quick.
Back to werewolves.
No, there's something I want to touch on real quick, and we'll do a longer episode on it in the near future. Which is, despite what people think, in no proper translation of the original Latin, I want to say, is it sang real, meaning holy blood. It's not even san grial, which would be holy grail. It's san gridalis, which gridalis meaning a plate, like a serving plate that you would carry food to somebody on. In the original oldest known Grail story, which is Parsifal from Crichton de Troyes, the Grail is a golden plate. Each day, a dove comes and lays a communion wafer on the plate. The king of the Grail king, who had been wounded in the side from an attack, takes the wafer and it keeps him alive for another day.
Oh, the Fisher King.
Yes,
Okay.
and um, Parsifal, who's actually related to the Fisher King, and is the original knight to complete the Grail quest, long before Galahad was even thought of. He makes the mistake because he was supposed to ask the question, "Who does the Grail serve?" But earlier in his story, he'd been admonished against asking too many questions, so he kept his mouth shut when he watched this procession, and he screws up the quest. And then he comes back, and it's a whole thing, and we'll get into that another day. But yeah, the Grail is neither a cup nor a bloodline. The Holy Grail thing is, and the Dan Brown. If anyone is unaware, do not rely on Dan Brown as a source on history, theology, or folklore ever. He just makes everything up. Not saying don't read him, just don't. Nothing he says is verified. Pretty much everything he says is wrong.
Yeah.
And that's okay because it's fiction. You don't have to. Everything doesn't have to be real in fiction. That's what fiction means. They can even put disclaimers on fiction saying it's based on a true story without basing it on anything.
Yeah. Well, and the same thing with folklore. That's why you find
Yeah.
so much folklore that, it was a means of entertainment. It wasn't always oral histories being passed down to preserve, actual knowledge of things that really happened. Sometimes it was just, no, this is a good story, and my
Yeah.
parents told it to me. I'm going to tell it to my kids, and
And I'm going to change it around a little to suit me and
I'm
my
going to
kids.
spice it up a little bit, or make this part make more sense, or it's like, yeah, and that's how these stories, evolved over time.
Which makes me think of one of the most famous true werewolf stories, The Beast of Gévaudan. So in France, there was a series of attacks over the course of years by a giant creature that survivors described as being wolf-like. Lots of different people hunted it, no end of problems. They killed it. They thought they killed it. It went away for a while, then the attack started up again. And supposedly at the end of the story, it was shot with a silver bullet, and that's what killed it. This is not true. Yes, there was a series of attacks by a creature that's described as wolf-like. And I think it's maybe even true that the guy that they say shot it in the end, or shot something in the end. For a start, silver is not a good metal to make bullets out of. I'm sorry for all the would-be vampire and werewolf hunters out there. It just isn't. It's too soft. It melts too easily. There's some serious debate, been some serious argument among ballistics experts that you can't actually make a working silver bullet. But the point being, in reality, silver being the only thing to kill a werewolf comes from the movies.
Yeah.
You use silver to kill vampires. You use regular weapons to kill werewolves. You don't need anything special most of the time. The previously mentioned berserkers are the exception, because when they're in their animal form and going crazy in battle, nothing can kill them. Doesn't matter if it's magical or silver or both, it won't kill them. You have to wait until afterwards when they have to go to sleep for long periods of time. Then you sneak up on them and you shank them.
Yeah.
But in general, werewolves are killed with swords, or killed with guns. Quite a few people that were believed to be werewolves were burnt at the stake. Although, and this was not unique to werewolves by any means, often when people were burnt at the stake, it's somewhat of a misnomer to say that, Because when I say burned at the stake, many of you are probably thinking of somebody being tied alive to a stake and burned to death. That absolutely happened. Jeanne d'Arc was alive when she was set on fire. A bunch of other people in Germany and France and other places were burned alive. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that didn't happen. It did. But more often, the person was strangled, drowned. Um, they had their head cut off, which, as I understand, was fairly popular with accused werewolves. And then you burn the body.
Hmm.
Because that way the body didn't come back.
Yeah. And you were also denying them like a proper burial,
Yes.
like in Christian terms.
But yeah, a lot of
Speaking of Jeanne d'Arc, one of the most famous werewolves is Guy
Gilda Ray.
Gilda Ray, her one of her generals and supporters.
Not just one of her generals, actually the chief general of France at the time.
Yeah, for a while, and he was also very. I believe he was instrumental in winning a couple of her victories because, despite her reputation, she actually wasn't a very good military commander. She lost a lot of the battles that she actually generaled because her only method of attack was get 'em Ray. And she just threw her army at the other army, figuring God would
side with the
God would
holy
side
cause
with
of
them
France.
and they would win, and that didn't happen.
Which, in her defense, was a very common mindset at the time, is that God would just side with the righteous side, so you didn't need to worry about strategy. Just trust that God will side with you because you're justified.
Yeah.
And see, in my opinion, rather unsurprisingly, that doesn't actually work very well.
But anyway, what I was segueing into was another interesting thing about werewolves is that was probably people's early understanding of what we would now call serial killers.
Yes, absolutely correct.
People in history that were serial killers were almost always referred to in medieval times as werewolves, which is kind of an interesting idea how those two things cross over.
There's a couple of examples of this. I would say that Gil's not a great example because there's a lot of reasons to think that he was actually innocent.
Oh, really?
Yes.
The biography that I saw of him did not really paint that picture.
It's certainly a matter of debate. But
I mean, he definitely seemed to be crazy, like despite possibly killing a bunch of kids and stuff like that.
And molesting. He was supposed to be a child molester too.
He apparently also did a lot of great things like spend enormous amounts of money building grand cathedrals for places. And yeah, he was kind of a all over the place sort of dude.
But there isn't a whole lot of evidence he's guilty of what he was accused of, other than a confession. And I've heard a lot of debate over whether or not the confession was obtained under torture.
It probably wouldn't have been unreasonable to think that. So I guess it is definitely possible that there were like political motivations for taking him down.
It's also been thought that he was known, at least before he may have sunk into Satanism and black magic and being a child killing molester, that he was known he was deeply religious.
Yeah.
So it's thought that he may have actually confessed just because they threatened to excommunicate him, and as a devout Catholic, he would have seen that as damning his soul forever, even if he didn't do what he was accused of.
Mm.
So he may have done it just because he felt he was saving his own soul. We don't. The problem being, it's hundreds of years after the fact. We honestly don't know. Yeah. Certainly, there's good evidence, I think, to say that if he was guilty of something, and he may have been, it probably got exaggerated.
It's certainly possible.
Certainly, there's stories that he was in league with an alchemist, and they were trying to summon Satan. And he had a book with Satan's true name in it, and even as a
Yeah,
believer in Satan, I'm extremely skeptical of that story.
he fell in with he definitely fell in either way with a bunch of disreputable characters later in his life, and that certainly didn't help him.
The usual argument is that he became disillusioned with the church because he was a big fanboy of Jean.
Yeah.
I've even seen some people suggest that he was in love with her.
Yeah, and when he was no longer useful, he was kind of cast aside politically.
Yeah. Granted, he got in some ways he kind of got off easier than Jean did. Given it was much, he lived a lot. She died a young woman,
Yeah.
burned at the stake on bullshit charges. I mean, even the church, only a few years later went, yeah, she's innocent. This was wrong. It was entire, we don't know for sure about Gil, but we know for certain that Jean's charges were political.
Yeah.
But no, DeRay and Bathory are both cases where a lot of historians question how much of the account of what we have now is true and how much of it was made up by political enemies.
Yeah.
For those who don't know yet, Gilles de Rais was the Field Marshal of France, which is essentially the commander-in-chief during near the end of the 100 Years' War, which means that he served alongside Jeanne d'Arc. Afterwards, when he went home, children started disappearing, and the rumor started circulating they were engaging in Satanism and were summoning the devil, and he was having sexual intercourse with these children and then murdering them. He was eventually burnt at the stake as a witch. Most accounts I've read over the years say he wasn't they threatened to torture him, but he didn't actually get tortured. I've talked to other historians that say no, he was tortured. But eventually gave.
Yeah. I mean, it could be possible that he wasn't because he was a nobleman and there was a lot of kind of noble privilege afforded to people, even accused murderers and.
Well, specifically the theory is that it wasn't that so much as they threatened to torture him, and just the threat was enough to terrify him into confessing. But that's often used as evidence that he was innocent, or actually used both ways because he didn't confess under torture, so why did he confess? And it's like because he didn't want to get tortured, because he didn't want to get excommunicated. The reality is we don't know. It's just one of those points in history that people are going to argue. And barring Gil's dead, spirit showing up and going, here's what really happened. Even then, who knows? But it's like nobody's really going to settle that question.
Sure.
The funny thing is, I've heard him associated with werewolves, but I've never actually read of stories of him turning into a wolf, which doesn't really change anything because there's, I want to say Hans, or is it Peter Straub? There's one of the people that was accused of being a werewolf in France, who was almost certainly an example, like you were saying, that werewolf was just what they used to call serial killers.
Yeah.
Because the story goes, the army found him. He had been running around on all fours for years, stealing bait, like he'd steal babies and eat them. And he was found that way. And the thing is, they called him a werewolf, but even in the eyewitness accounts of what was happening, no, he's just described as a big, hairy guy running around on all fours. He's not supposed to have transformed into anything.
Yeah. I mean, he could have been suffering from the clinical idea of lycanthropy, where he believed himself to be some kind of a wolf.
I think there's definitely good reason to think he suffered some kind of mental illness.
Yeah. Yeah, most rational people don't engage.
Run around on four, eat babies.
Yeah. That's not usually the thing to do.
Well, atheists eat babies, but that's a whole other thing. And obviously, any atheists that watch this, I'm joking.
And Democrats.
Oh yes,
They're all big on the eating babies thing.
atheists and Democrats share recipes. In fact,
Yeah.
although all Democrats are actually atheists, so it's a moot point. And yes, obviously, we're having a bit of fun and political nonsense, not making serious claims. God, QAnon, slightly paranormal thing we will not be discussing on this channel anytime in the foreseeable future.
Oh,
Although, funny thing, and I meant to mention this at the beginning of the show, because we did not do a show last week. At least a couple of people thought we did, because I did. While I unlisted it almost immediately, I did put up a pair of videos last week. But they were not meant to be a show, nor were they actually meant for general public consumption. I am going back to school in January after 20 years hiatus, and I'm very excited about that. I'm going to be studying history. But the school that I'm going to be attending sent a general email out to people saying they were looking for people to take part in a TEDx talk. And since, as everyone who watched, as you, Brian, in particular, but anyone who watches this channel knows, I love to hear myself talk.
Yeah.
So I decided to apply, and I needed to make a video, a 40-second elevator pitch video as part of my application. And I needed to post, basically share a link, so I posted it here, and then made it unlisted. For those who are curious, and the reason I bring this up, the plan for the video, if I get accepted, and I have not heard anything one way or the other yet, but it's early, is I want to talk about witch trials. Particularly, because originally I was going to talk about things people don't know about the Salem witch trials, because you and like everybody else, and I tended to agree with everyone, agreed that was the best topic of the three I came up with.
Yeah.
But the theme of this TEDx, event, I guess is the word for it, is where is there? Because the college's motto or whatever it is we'll get you from here to there.
Oh.
So since I couldn't figure out how to shoehorn what you didn't know about the Salem witch trials into that theme, I'm doing that from a negative perspective, where there is where witch trials in general are going. Because I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but if you think witch trials are a thing of the past, even here in the United States, you need to go take a good look at Pizzagate and QAnon. We're still doing witch trials. And whichever side of the political spectrum you fall on, Republican or Democrat, you should be disturbed that we're still talking witch trials. I mean, I did a video on the channel a while back about Greg Locke, who's a prominent right-wing pastor who's literally accused members of his own church of witchcraft on the word of demons, no less. And he claims that witches are putting tarot cards and Ouija boards under the wood chips that they use as the floor, because his church is actually a big circus den. This worries the hell out of me. And I think it's worth talking about, which is why I suggested it as my topic.
Okay.
We are also coming up on the end of everything. Do we have any other things we want to mention? Any other neat stories that we could do real quick?
Let me just say. Yeah, we mentioned heredity in Central Java. They have weretigers that are considered to be a hereditary condition that runs in certain families. But sometimes it can also be the result of a sorcerer's curse. So,
Word to the wise: don't take off sorcerers. It doesn't end well.
Yeah, but yeah, it that still kind of fits in with a lot of the general themes we've been talking about of
Yep.
shapeshifter stories throughout the world and history. But yeah, it's a great topic. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is fascinating. It always fascinates me, and I think there's a lot of clues to our history, even pre-recorded history there. Because if you want to talk, I mean, there are cave paintings that suggest shapeshifters,
Yeah.
which means this may very well be a legend that predates Homo sapiens. It's like that's a crazy idea to me. Well, then again, that's the other thing. Ghosts and vampires may very well predate Homo sapiens as well, because we find Neanderthal graves that have ritual. The bodies are clearly treated with rituals, which in a
Yeah.
lot of of Homo sapien cultures, a lot of the rituals are at least in part intended to ward away the person coming back as an angry spirit.
Yeah.
The even more telling one is they found Neanderthal bodies that were tied up posthumously, after death,
Hmm.
and that really suggests they think something more than just a funeral range going on here.
Yeah. Well, it's not that hard to imagine. I mean, you
No.
figure obviously they, primitive peoples were using animal skins almost exclusively as clothing. So
Yep.
the idea that some part of that animal
Lived
that you
on.
were wearing could become part of you, or vice versa, it's
Or
not
part
a,
of the animal that you ate, because that's another common thing.
yeah, that too. Yeah, if you eat the heart of an animal or whatever to take its power. But yeah, it's a very easy kind of leap to make imaginatively.
But we're pretty much coming up on the end of our hour. Um, I want to take the time to thank everybody for listening. We love you all.
Yeah, comment on
Um,
the video if you have
yes,
anything else to add.
ask questions. Questions are always welcome. Our chat's been surprisingly quiet tonight.
Yeah.
Um, but if you haven't yet, please take the time to subscribe. Consider giving us a thumbs up. We always appreciate that. If you really like what we're doing, you can always consider going to our Patreon, patreon.com/demonology. That's patreon.com/demonology. And donating, it's not mandatory. The videos are going to continue to be free. But, you know, we're working on whatever money we can scrape by from working regular jobs and paying our bills. So we'd love to do new equipment and other fancy bells and whistles, but we could use help for that. Particularly keep in mind, coming in June of next year, I am going to Romania and Transylvania in particular. Um, Very exciting, particularly because not only am I going to be going with Dacre Stoker, great grandnephew of Bram Stoker, Victoria Price, who is the daughter of Vincent Price,
Oh,
has decided to join us for this adventure.
nice.
Um, but while I'm over there, I'm planning on trying to do some episodes. I'm planning on trying to do some EVP,
Hmm.
um, and see what will happen. So some new equipment for that would definitely be helpful. I want to try and get a GoPro, for example. Um, but so you can consider helping us out. If you don't, that's okay. We love you anyway. Um, Keep in mind as well. Stay tuned to the channel. I am going to be starting probably in the next couple of days a new series of videos on a different channel where I will be running a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons Dragonlance campaign. So you get probably a weekly video of us playing, and then I'm also going to do side videos and talk about Dragonlance as a setting and the gods and the races, and
Hmm.
maybe some videos on D&D in general to help introduce people to the setting, introduce people to D&D as a hobby. Um, if nothing, maybe it'll be popular. Maybe nobody will watch it. I'll just do it because I'm a giant nerd and I enjoy doing it. Either way is good with me. Um,
I think it'll probably come down to usually those kind of videos are edited, I don't know if anybody's going to watch a 4-hour video of you guys playing a D&D session.
You gotta play, but we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
I don't really want to edit it too much, just because it's better to do it raw, in my opinion. Although we probably won't be doing full 4-hour sessions just by virtue of it's nice to run for 4 hours. The grown up reality is that's a lot of time to commit to a game anymore.
Yeah.
People have to go to work, people getting out of work. It's a whole thing. For the glory days of college where we could run for 8 hours, run all night, even. Yeah, I've done it a couple of times. That's going to do it for this week, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kevin Mears, your host, the Paranormal Encyclopedia, saying good night. And
Ryan McKinley saying, keep your fangs sharp.
good night and God bless everybody. We'll see you next week.